Hello, everyone. Today we'll be looking at ATF's new 34 notices that they just posted. I watched the press conference and I also read all of these, as you could see. But before we begin, just wanted to let you know I am not a lawyer. This is not to be interpreted as legal advice. Also, these are just summaries of the new rules. These are not necessarily so what that means is that these are just all summaries. None of these are the actual rules themselves. Those will be uploaded to the Federal Register within the next day or two. So keep in mind, any and all videos that you see within the next 24 to 48 hours are going to be ones that are talking about the summaries. The people that will actually jump deep into the weeds and look at the rules themselves will be people like Washington gun law and those other lawyer esque channels. So let me full screen this. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're not gonna read absolutely like we're not gonna read all of this, right? Because some of this stuff has been reiterated before. Basically, this is ATF's new era of reform, allegedly, right? And this is just a summary of what the rules we are going to look at, but I want to waste really no time at all and really get into these subcategories because these are the actual notices themselves. And just because there's 34, you'll see titles like 34 new rules posted. Well, that's technically true. A lot of these are either repeals or clarifications on prior rulings. Actually, new rules are I'll point those out as we go for actual new rules. Okay, so let's start with the repeal group. These are rules that are repealed, rescinding regulatory language that exceeds statutory authority, failed judicial review, or did not achieve their intended outcomes. So the first one is removing factoring criteria for firearms with attached stabilizing braces. Basically, the pistol brace rule after it gets posted to Federal Register, there'll be 90 days for comment, and then these rules will go into effect. So effectively, most of these are Biden era recensions, right? So you'll see stuff like there's no. I'm just gonna say right now there is nothing about alleged ghost guns or additively manufactured guns or anything like that. That's not within this packet. I already looked through everything. It's not anywhere on here. So that new rule that John Crump was talking about like 80% and stuff like that. That's not in here. So we'll just go through what is in here though. We won't talk about anything that's not in this packet. We're not going to speculate on that, maybe for a future video, but for now, we're just going over the information. Okay, so basically, the pistol brace rule is effectively dead. I'm not going to read this entire thing. Basically, a lot of federal courts found that the 2023 rule was they violated the APA, and the rule basically was enjoined, it was vacated in its entirety. So it couldn't have been enforced anyways, but it was still on the books. This is effectively removing the rule from the books, even though it hasn't been enforced really anywhere in the United States since I want to say uh, the autumn of 2023. Right. So the next one, this one is revising regs defining engage in the business as a dealer in firearms. And I'll read this one out. ATF is revising regulatory changes made to its definition in the of the engaged in the business of dealing in firearms. The rule rescinds certain provisions of the definitions of engaged in the business. The rescinded changes have not produced the anticipated outcomes in terms of FFL applications, administrative licensing actions, civil forfeitures, or other anticipated enforcement metrics. The rule retains the definition of engaged in a business as specifically revised and codified by Congress in the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, ensuring ATF regulatory definitions reflect statutory language Congress enacted. Basically, they're just taking away everything that they put into engaged in a business, right? So that entire rule is rescinded. All we have is what Congress passed, which basically says that, um, you know, flipping firearms for a profit, if you do that too many times, you could be engaged in the business. Basically, ATF tried to define it as any time at any point with any gun that you sell or whatever, you could be quote unquote engaged in the business, even if it's simple as, let's just say I buy a handgun here, right? I bought a handgun at a gun store 2 years ago for $250. I then have somebody offer me $300 for that same handgun. Under the old ATF precedent of engaged in the business, I would have been engaged in the business of firearms and could have been labeled as a firearms dealer, and therefore I'd be dealing firearms without a license, which is a felony, right? Should be a strong emphasis on that, right? Because ATF was very unclear on when they would and would not enforce this. Basically, the big blowout from this rule was the Brian Malinowski. I believe that's what his name was. The airport executive who was killed in his own home because he was buying and selling guns at gun shows, essentially. All right, let's move on. This one is interesting. So I'm really curious when the actual um uh rulings comes out. I really want to revisit this, right? Revising machine gun definition in response to Supreme Court decision. Final rule. ATF is removing two sentences from its three regulatory definitions of machine gun that previously incorporated bump stocks into these definitions. This action responds directly to the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in Garland v. Cargill, which held that semi-automatic rifles equipped with bump stocks do not satisfy the statutory definition of machine gun under the National Firearms Act. This rescission, I think that's how you say that. Sorry, I didn't get a lot of sleep. Aligns ATF's regulatory text with the statute and the court's binding legal interpretation. So they said removing two sentences from its three regulatory definitions of machine gun. Right. So I don't know what that means. If that means, I remember watching a Washington gun law video a while ago, right? And it said something about they expanded their machine gun definition. It was like a paragraph long, right? So I'm guessing they're removing two sentences from it. Maybe the two sentences that they added. My assumption, and this is my hope, right, that they're just making it into the federal definition instead of their definition, right? They're revising it to where it's what the NFA says, so those two definitions will match rather than be solely independent of each other, which would mean stuff like force reset triggers, super safeties, um, things of that nature would be more, um, I guess more. I shouldn't say more legal, right? But it gives more uh, preference to gun owners than it does to the government. And then removing youth handgun safety notice. If you guys don't know what this is, basically what this was is when I turned 21, I went out and bought a handgun, and FFLs are required to give you a little pamphlet that ATF requires to be given to transferees that are just turning 21 or in between the ages of like 21, 22, 23 years old. I got a couple of them. Those would end up pretty much straight in the trash. I did read it all once, and it's basically just basic gun rules and look up your state's laws and stuff like that, right? And basically, this is just rescinding that requirement. So, okay, then. It's basically a nothing burger. But I'll read it to you anyways. ATF is proposing to rescind this statute to remove the requirement for FFLs to post a sign and provide written notification to each handgun purchaser regarding the Youth Handgun Safety Act. This 1998 regulation was established to inform purchasers of the 1994 Youth Handgun Safety Act. The proposed rescission reduces unnecessary burden to FFLs to inform purchasers about a law that has been in place for over 30 years now and is readily accessible. Yeah, so basically, no point. It's like buying an NFA item and then being handed all the definitions of what an NFA item is, right? Or not necessarily that, but what you can and cannot do with certain things. And honestly, if you are really concerned about stuff like that, you should be either looking it up online or in more serious cases consulting a lawyer. Okay, so now we're going to go to modernize. I just realized there's a drop down group. I'll just click on these. Okay, modernize, updating ATF's compliance and record keeping framework to reflect current technology and business practices. So here's the big one on top here, the one we've been waiting for over a year. ATF is proposing revising firearms transaction record Form 4473. They're proposing a comprehensive update to the 4473, requiring all commercial firearm transfers and implementing regulations. The proposed rule would streamline identity and residency verification requirements for transferees, increase the time period of which NICS background check remains valid. This is a very good thing, and I'll explain to you in a minute why that is. Clarify exemptions to background check, permit electronic notice, and authorize use of electronic forms, auto population, and digital attachments. Basically, if you buy guns through like California or Illinois, you would be allowed to digitally attach things. It's basically for FFLs, right? The proposed rule would also incorporate ATF rulings and other guidance to align regulations with their authorizing statutory text, as well as make minor technical revisions. So you can go back and, in case there's something wrong, you can, fix it. These updates reflect modern business practices and are intended to reduce administrative burden on law-abiding citizens and businesses while maintaining robust safeguards against unlawful transfers. So basically, from what I heard and what everyone was told, is that the 4473 is going to be reduced from like 3 or 4 pages to 1, right? It's going to be 1 page. You fill out everything, and it's basically all streamlined. They're changing some of the questions, residing in city limits or not. They're simplifying it. And the reason why the increase in the time period for which NICS background check remains valid, the reason why that's a good thing is because some people who have had their firearm rights taken away and then later on restored will oftentimes get a delay and sometimes a denial, right? And when people go to correct that, right, they say, hey, this is what happened, this is wrong, and then the FBI goes, you're right, this is wrong. Then they can then that person before this rule would have to go in and redo the background check, get a new NICS check with it, and basically do the process all over again. Whilst with this, that NICS check remains in place, and if that status or whatever is altered, you don't have to redo all the paperwork again. So you could just go in and pick up your firearm and leave. So that's basically why this is a good thing. All right. Sorry, my brain is moving faster than than I'm talking, so I apologize if I slip up over myself and stuff like that. Firearms electronic records keeping, it basically allows the FFLs to retain electronic records keeping rather than physical papers. It just reduces burden and effort, and it also allows it's basically makes it easier for the FFLs, ATF, and law enforcement if they need to do a trace. You could just go in your computer, look up this record, look up the serial number, and then download the 4473 Now this is kind of a little bit to me because you know, is that a form of registry or not? You know, I don't know. But this seems like a more positive change for FFLs, basically reducing headache, right? And allowing them to be more in compliance, I guess. Firearm records retention periods. This one is the one that there's a lot of eyes on. So I'll just read this in its entirety. ATF is proposing to replace the current practice of indefinite records retention of FFL records with definite retention periods for ATF 4473s and acquisition and disposition A&D records. ATF is considering retention periods of either 20 or 30 years and is requesting public comment on the appropriate time frame of those records. So, yeah, anyways, I have something to say about this. ATF also proposes a 20 or 30-year retention period that would be required for ATF out of business records center at the National Tracing Center. The proposal will introduces a 90-day retention period for records related to private party transfers and voluntary firearm handlers checks. Additionally, the proposal includes a 5-year retention period for multiple sales reports, pistols and revolvers, theft loss reports, and 4473s where the transaction is initiated but not completed. This update reflects federal records management principles and provides regulatory clarifications for licensees. All right, let's talk about this. First of all, 20 to 30 years is way too long. It should be closer to 10 to 15 years. But usually, because according to the FBI's own statistics and ATF's own statistics, the time to crime on guns is generally about 10 years. So, when a gun is made and sold at an FFL, generally that gun on average, okay, out of the hundreds of millions of guns that we have, the gun will end up at a crime scene or related, right, for handguns and stuff like that. Between, right around 10 to 15 years. That's when the retention record should be between 10 to 15 years, if there is going to be one. I'd prefer there not to be one because you could have a de facto registry without actually having a registry, which is what is currently happening. Um so these are retention periods for FFLs. This is what they're talking about. So FFLs would have to hold on to it for 20 to 30 years, and it was requesting public comment on appropriate time period, right? Time frame, whatever. ATF also proposes a 20 to 30 year retention for would be required for ATF's out of business records center, right? So basically, let's just say worst case scenario, right? And ATF, you buy a gun back in, let's just say 2005, right? No, let's just say 2007. You bought a handgun 2007. Okay. That FFL went just out of business at the 19-year mark. It then gets sent off to uh out of business record, and then they can sit on it for another 20 to 30 years. So you could have a gun that was purchased, you know, like 19 years ago or 29 years ago, back in 1997, and you could have that FFL or that 4473 potentially around for 60 years. So I mean, if I'm reading this correctly, unless if it's 30 years from the transaction period, right? Which I'm not reading it as. I'm reading it as retention times of 20 to 30 years, right? From when the FFL has it. And then once it goes to out of business center, it's 20 to 30 years on top of that. So, yeah, not great. I think this will definitely be shortened. There's no way that pro gun people will like this or accept it. By the way, I'm just going to check to see if I'm still recording here. Okay, I am. All right. Just checking on that. Okay, all right, let's scroll down here. But this one is going to be one of contention, excuse me. And probably will do an updated video of some sort looking at the actual regulation of this and seeing what the entirety of it says, because there might need to be more clarity on this summary here. And these two basically are for FFLs. I have no idea what this is. Revising non-over-the-counter firearm transaction requirements. Like what? Like is this? I have no idea what this is. The proposed rule would allow FFLs to comply with the non-over-the-counter transactions originally implemented by the Gun Control Act, and requirements more effectively include identity verification. This update is based on the recognition of increased options of securely. This all looks like it's just. Excuse me. This all looks like it's just for FFL stuff, and so is this too, right? Okay, let's go to reduced burden. So this is the one that I am the most interested in, is the reduced burden one. This has the most stuff in it, or stuff. I think this list of stuff affects the individual the most, right? Except for like these last three, right? These have nothing to do with individuals. But these ones are. Okay, so this is the one I'm one of the most excited about. This one and the where is it? Oh, it's not on here. It's going to be on something else. It's going to be on Clarify, probably. Interstate transport and temporary export of NFA firearm of National Firearms Act items. Basically, I'll just summarize this with. I'll summarize the summary. You can now cross state lines again. Not now. I shouldn't state now. All these will have to be put on the federal registry, wait there for 90 days, and then they'll be officially codified in the rural federal regulations, right? Excuse me, I'm gonna take a drink real quick. All right. Basically, what this allows you to do is cross state lines with NFA items and not have to let ATF know. And as far as I read it here, again, not a lawyer, not legal advice. Wait until the rules are fully published, right? The actual amount of pages, right? Read through those, which I will be doing. I'll read through all of these to see if there's anything extra, and if there is, I'll make a new video on it. But what this looks like is that if you are going across state lines for less than 365 days, you do not have to let ATF know about that trip whatsoever. You can effectively drive across state lines. So, like for me, I'm in Idaho. I can go over to Montana with my SBRs, or if I had a machine gun, I could go over there with a machine gun without letting ATF know. That's a big, huge thing. That has not been a thing since 1968, right? You couldn't do that since 1968. The only items you would be allowed to do that with without letting ATF know is with suppressors or silencers, as they call it in the NFA, and AOWs, any other weapons. Basically, like Subaru, Super Shorties, or other guns that would fall into AOW, right? Vertical grips on pistols that are lawfully registered. And again, these are all. This is targeting, and this is specifically talking about lawfully registered NFA items. If your NFA item is not lawfully registered, this obviously doesn't apply to you. But yeah, and if you're there for more than 365 days, or a permanent relocation, would still have to submit notice, but would not need to await ATF approval before transporting. So that's great. You just send in a notice saying, hey, I'm moving. This is where I'm moving to. And then you just move. You don't wait for ATF approval anymore. You just go. That's great. That is awesome. This I genuinely think is a very, very good thing for NFA owners, because there's a lot of people who don't know about that, who just let's just say they got SBRs or registered SBRs or bought SBRs in Washington, and then they moved to Oregon, or they moved to Idaho, or hell, all the way down to Florida, right? And they do that for they find out 2 or 3 years later that they were supposed to notify ATF that they were moving, And then now you got to have an awkward conversation with a lawyer, and then they talk with ATF, and it's just a big old mess. Now you don't really need to worry about that. You just send in a notice saying, "Hey, I'm moving to this address," and then that's the end of it. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, joint registration for spouses under National Firearms Act. This is also a really, really, really good thing too. This would allow a married couple to file a joint application as makers and or transferees of NFA regulated firearms. So if you're married to your, husband, wife, whatever, right? And you're a married couple and you, let's just say the husband wants to make an SBR or make a whatever, a suppressor, etc. Or heck, this is actually probably uh, more impactful. Let's just say the husband gets enough money or the wife gets enough money, whatever, to buy a transferable machine gun, right? Well, now what they could do instead of that person either having a individual application or individual owning it on an individual level, and then if their spouse wants to go to the range with that machine gun, right, they would have to have that person come with them, the actual owner of that item, and they can't just let their spouse take the gun and go to the range. That would be felonious activity, right? Uh, or they would have to have them under a legal trust, which has added costs and complexities. This would just allow husband and wife to both own that item. So, God forbid, nope, shit, things are falling over. Oh no. So, God forbid, if the husband dies or the wife dies, then that NFA item, if it's not clearly uh, written out in the will where it goes to, kind of sits in limbo a little bit, right? And it just adds unnecessary uh, headache and regulation on top of that. This would just allow that if the husband dies, it's now the wife's, right? Because it's jointly owned. It's owned by two people. Here's another really good one. This one was really confusing because a lot of people thought that this was removed back in September or October. It was not removed. It was posted in the Federal Register, but it wasn't actually codified yet. I myself, when um, I called the NFA division uh, and asked them about this personally, and the lady behind the phone told me that the Clio notification is still required. Right now, they're actually officially saying that they're removing the Clio notification under the National Firearms Act. So it's removing the requirement for an applicant to forward chief law enforcement officer of his or her locality a copy of their NFA application. Right, it's just being completely removed at this point. Instead of just a notification, now it's gone. It will be gone from these this new rule being published, which is a good thing. It makes things less complicated, and also if you're to buy, let's just say, now the NFA times are relatively quick. They're actually really quick now. Stuff like websites like Capital Armory, who will offer delivery to your front doorstep NFA items. I'm assuming after this, Clio notification is fully removed because they add I believe it's not a 30-day, but like a 10-day, or they add a delay to give Clio's time to respond to the notification, and if they don't respond, they just send out the item. And now that that's gone away, I think going to NFA items to your front door will become more popular because of this, because it will be even quicker. Because let's just say you get approved for a NFA item in less than a week, which is entirely and totally possible. You can have that item shipped out, and you can get an NFA item from online to your front doorstep in about 2 weeks, which is awesome. And clarifying interstate transport of firearms under the Gun Control Act. This one is pretty big too. Basically, under the old way of things, right? You can transport firearms across state lines, uh, through interstate travel, right? And in states, it's basically something that was put in place by the 1986 Firearm Owners Protection Act, which is also the same act that closed the machine gun registry. But we don't have to talk about that. We'll talk about that another day, right? But it added one of the pro gun things that it added was allowing people to drive interstate with firearms that are banned in that state. So long as you're just traveling through the state, you can have those firearms locked in the trunk of your car or whatever, and you're fine, right? But it has to be interstate travel. You have to constantly keep driving. If you stop for, it could be interpreted as you can't even stop for fuel to refuel your car. You can't stop for a bathroom break or anything like that. Basically, ATF is expanding this to include overnight stops, vehicle maintenance, refueling, emergency stops, and medical treatments are now considered as a necessary part of transport, which is awesome. That's a really good thing. And the rest of these are related to basically SOTs. This one for like explosives. This one is just tax payments per business activity. It's just clarifying for that for SOTs, and transferring machine guns between qualified licensees. It's just stuff for SOT stuff, and I'm sure that people who have an SOT will be able to explain this further. I don't personally have an SOT yet. I will get one of these days when I move on to a property that will allow me to do that. All right, clarify. This one is these a lot. There's a lot of really good stuff in here, and that not a lot of people will pick up on immediately. I did. So firearm activities in foreign trade zones. They're amending the definition of importation in its Gun Control Act and National Firearms Act regulations to create a parallel exclusion from import requirements for items brought into custom bonded warehouses, CBWs, matching the inclusion that already exists in the foreign trade zones. The proposal also removes the restriction that currently limits permissible FFL activities in FTZs and CBWs to storage only, expanding the range of lawful activities FFLs may conduct on items held in these facilities. Together, these changes reduce regulatory ambiguity for importers and licensees operating within the international trading environment. So basically, you can take imported guns and you can do more shit with them, basically. There's more shit you can do in foreign trade zones and stuff like that you couldn't do before, which is a good thing. This one is going to be an awesome one for kit builders. Importing dual use frames, receivers, or barrels. Beforehand, it was just dual use barrels. Now it's actually frames and receivers. ATF is proposing to clarify that FFLs may lawfully import firearm barrels and frames/receivers capable on being used on both sporting and non-sporting firearms, provided that an identified sporting configuration for the barrel or frame or receiver exists at the time of importation. The rule also clarifies that once lawfully imported, a dual use barrel or frame or receiver may be incorporated into the assembly of a sporting, non-sporting, or NFA regulated firearm, subject to compliance with all federal laws. Basically, this is a really, really good thing because now you can import, let's just say, an AK receiver with an attached barrel riveted in place, right? Just the receiver and the barrel. You make that into a sporting configuration, and then you present that to ATF saying, "Hey, this is a sporting configuration of this item I want to bring in. Can I bring in this item?" And then they say yes, and then they can import the frame receiver. They can import the receiver and the barrel attached together, and then make it to whatever they want. They still obviously need to comply with like 922R and stuff like that, but it would allow them, instead of importing whole sporting firearms, they could import just the receiver and the barrel, which will make things significantly cheaper. and that's a really, really good thing. And I'm really excited about this. This is a good thing for the AK market, um, and people who enjoy AKs or even other firearms. Just a receiver and a barrel. You can have those together and then build out the rest of the gun once it's in the States. Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right. So now we're getting into importation of training rounds. This is about simunitions. They do not meet the statutory definition of ammunition and therefore are not regulated under GCA or the Arms Export Control Act, provided the round is not for a firearm. The codification provides regulatory certainty for importers, manufacturers, and law enforcement suppliers who produce, acquire, distribute these products. Basically, this is meant for law enforcement training or military training stuff. Um, Converting temporary to permanent imports for defense articles. This has really nothing to do with us. Individuals. This one here is what I'm really excited about. Another thing, too. Allowing makers to adopt certain markings for National Firearms Act. ATF is proposing to allow individuals, this is a key word, individuals who make NFA firearms by altering the existing firearm to adopt the markings already applied by the original manufacturer rather than applying additional redundant markings. Thank God. Yes. This is something that SOTs could do, but now ATF is making a new rule that's allowing individuals to do this. This is awesome. So let's just say you buy a PSA rifle of some sort, right? They're one of their $400 pistols, right? With 10.5 and 11.5 inch barrel, whatever, right? They're really cheap. You could now, after this, of course, after this is fully, this is not the law yet or not the rule yet, but it will be after like 90 days public comment. They have to go through the whole APA process, which in total is about 90-ish days, plus or minus a week or two, right? And or plus a week or two. I shouldn't say minus because 90 days is the requirement. But once you get this pistol and you're like, hey, I want to change this in a short barreled rifle. You fill out the paperwork to register it. You get your tax stamp. You put a stock on it. That's the end of it. Thank you. This is awesome because we now no longer have to, because beforehand, like, let's just take my obviously not my legal name, just Uncle Joe, and then I'd put city and state. So we'd put on beforehand you would put like um I'm just trying to draw a name. Let's just say, yeah, Uncle or Uncle Joe or Ben Joe, whatever, and then you'd have to put like Boise, Idaho, and you'd have to engrave that in your firearm somewhere. Now this is saying you don't have to do that marking, and it says because the original importer and manufacturer serial number and markings are already required by statute and regulation, this proposal eliminates the duplicative regulatory requirement while ensuring NFA marking requirements are satisfied. Because you're registering the firearm itself. Why do you need to put your name, city, and state on there? You shouldn't need to, because the firearm, the serial number itself is tied to the NFA registry. And it says ATF has previously accommodated this practice through individual variances. This proposed rule codifies that accommodation into regulation to provide consistent, clear guidance across the industry. I think what they mean by this is the pistol brace. I think there's like individuals who requested that they didn't have to engrave their firearms and or something like that, or maybe because of the amnesty for pistol braces, that's what they're talking about with individual variances, right? So that's a really good thing, and I'm really excited about that. And that's awesome. So, like, for example, I registered to AR platform firearms. They're both still pistols because I still need to engrave them, right? I was going to send them off to get engraved through the mail. Now I'm just going to keep them as pistols until this rule gets fully codified, and then I can just put a stock on it, and then that's perfectly fine. So that's awesome. I don't need to engrave my bullshit on there, which is awesome. That allows me to still be able to, in the future, if I wanted to resell the gun to somebody else or something like that. Yeah, it just allows me to not engrave in the gun whatsoever, which is awesome. And for future purchases, I can do the same thing, which is that's all great. I'm really happy about that. I'll see what the actual this I'll specifically look out for this section and read the entire rule, and if there's anything different to what I'm saying, I will post that in the updated following video. All right. This is just for transporting firearms. This one is pretty significant too, revising definitions of adjudicated as mental defective and committed to mental institution. I'll just read this one out. ATF is proposing to modernize the regulatory definition of mental defective, the term used in the Gun Control Act, to identify a category of persons prohibited from possessing firearms to reflect current medical and legal standards. The proposed rule would refine the term mental defective, associating it with intellectually disabled, right? So I'm not sure what this exactly means. The proposed rule would refine the term mentally defective, associating it with intellectually disabled. Okay, and clarify that a person receiving assistance in only one functional area, such as financial management, would not, on that basis alone, be considered prohibited under this definition, which is a good thing. Now, I am a little worried about this intellectually disabled because there's a lot of autistic gun owners out there, right? But I'm assuming they mean like people who have severe Parkinson's or people who are actually a danger to themselves or others, stuff like that. That's generally what, yeah. So I'm assuming that's what that is. Anyways, the proposal also clarifies existing prohibitions, um, specifically individuals committed to a mental institution resulting from a determination that an individual is a danger to themselves or others, or is found not guilty by reason of insanity, properly fall within the definition of committed to a mental institution and not within the definitions of mental defective. Because mental defective has its own list of requirements, right? It has its own list of things. Um, that okay, what is the definition of mental defective? And it gives you have to meet all these criteria of mental defective. Rather than so they're basically making it to where people who are found not guilty by insanity actually get prohibited from owning guns and not, you know, yeah. Generally, those people who are found not guilty by reason of insanity are and they're committed for life generally, so it doesn't really matter. But it anyways, I will definitely look more into this because this seems there seems to be a lot more behind the veil here that I'll definitely take a look at. Clarifying exemptions to the Brady Act background check requirement. um I'm guessing they're going to expand on like state permits, basically saying, hey, it has to be unexpired, right? And stuff like that. Selecting biological sex on ATF forms. Basically, now they're just going to say, hey, we're making a new requirement that you have to select your biological sex, like your sex from birth, on federal forms like ATF NFA forms and 4473s and stuff like that. Definition of business premises. This just expands. Um, this just expands the definition of business premises, right? Firearm transactions and straw purchases. Basically, it's amending its regulation to provide. It's basically to provide clarity on what a straw purchase is and stuff like that. Created a definition of willfully. This is also a really good thing for FFLs, and they're basing it off of United States Supreme Court Bryan v. United States, under which a person acts willfully when they know their conduct is unlawful, even if unaware of the specific statutory provision being violated. So that's a good thing. Basically allows people who unknowingly commit uh violations, because beforehand willfully just meant it happened. So therefore it was willful. Now it's you have to actually know that what you're doing is wrong, which is that's a good thing. All right, align. So that's everything here. There will definitely be more stuff to look into. There's a lot more stuff specifically with the adopting NFA markings, and the revising definitions of it as adjudicated as mental defective, right? So you gotta there is some stuff there, right, that needs to be looked at further. Align, conforming ATF's regulatory text to reflect statutory changes to judicial decisions and actions taken by partner agencies. Okay, so this stuff right here is we'll just read through this, right? Conforming change to for approving making application. ATF is issuing a final rule to formally codify in regulation the existing practice of conducting a NICS checks as part of the National Firearms Act approval process. Okay, so this is basically a way to speed up NFA processing times. They already are doing it now, but they're just codifying it and basically saying, okay, your passport photos look good, your fingerprints are good. We'll just throw you through a NICS check. All right, you get approved, then and then therefore your NFA application is approved, right? Basically, it's just wanting to make the process a bit faster. Uh, this one is wait, no, this is not the one that. Okay. Sorry. There's one down here that I really want to talk about. But we'll talk about this one first. Export control reform, conforming references to Department of Commerce. ATF is issuing a final rule to make technical and administrative clarifications, clarifying amendments to its regulations, which control import and export of firearms, ammunition, and defense articles under the Arms Export Control Act. These changes correspond to regulatory changes previously made by departments of Commerce and State. This rule adds references to reflect that certain transactions now fall under the Commerce's export and temporary import jurisdiction. These changes respond to actions by the Department of Commerce and State to provide export and temporary import controls between those agencies. The rule also makes technical amendments for clarity. No substantive policy changes are made. Basically, it's just this seems like it's just changing some definitions around, or just clarifying some stuff in here. This really doesn't apply to us too much, so this one is really interesting. This one may not seem like that interesting, but I think this is the hidden nugget right here, specifically for AK people. So, update to prescribed countries for import restrictions. ATF is proposing to update the import restrictions applicable to certain countries under the Arms Export Control Act. The proposed rule would remove the existing static list of prescribed countries from which ATF denies applications to permanently import defense articles and services, replacing it with a dynamic reference to the Department of State's list of prescribed countries. This ensures ATF's import restrictions remain current and consistent with State Department designations without requiring separate ATF rulemaking each time the list changes. This is a good thing, so that way, in case a state is a country is no longer sanctioned, it doesn't need a separate ATF rulemaking to determine, hey, this place is the state is no longer sanctioned, so now we can allow imports to come in. And here's the big one right here. This rule also proposes to remove the list for former Soviet countries from which ATF currently denies applications to permanently import most firearms and ammunition, retaining only the Russian Federation as a prescribed country of origin for these imports. That is huge, considering that there's a lot of former Soviet countries that make 7.62 by 39 or 5.45 by 39, or 5.45, right? uh 7.62 by 39, 9 by 39. This is a really good thing for ammunition specifically, because a lot of the Soviet countries have Soviet weaponry and ammunition, therefore they can import that stuff, and that stuff is generally pretty. It's going to be a lot cheaper, right? So that's a really good change as well. I'm really happy about that, and I think this will be a big thing. Okay. So this is adding component definitions under the Armed Export Control Act. ATF is proposing to amend the language in its specialized subset of regulations under that act to align with the Department of State's terminology already in use with the United States munition list. By aligning terminology used to describe these defense articles, this technical update would reduce ambiguity for FFLs and FELs and defense industry stakeholders. And this one's just about tobacco, which is kind of interesting that it's thrown in there, but okay. And then the final one out of all this is changes to the National Firearms Act tax remittance provisions. This basically it reflects the one big beautiful bill tax remittance rate for certain firearms. It just makes it, hey, in the regulations, we're now officially seeing these as $0 tax items. So that's basically it. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. My overall thoughts. Excuse me. My overall thoughts on this is that this is a positive thing. It's a positive direction. They're taking a right. This is a first step, right? We've been waiting over a year on this, and it's not quite the 60 rules or the 100 rules we heard, but it is a step in the right direction. And I personally think there are more rules like this coming down the pipeline, and this is the most amount of rules. I think and I've messaged a couple people and asked them, "Hey, have you ever seen this before?" And they've said, "No, this is really unprecedented from ATF to do." Um, and I ultimately think this is a first step leading into a positive direction. Hopefully, within the next couple of years, there'll be more pro-gun stuff moving forward, and more stuff changing in the positive direction, right? I think a lot of these rules actually it's kind of a equal split a little bit. They both have good things for FFLs and also really good things for individuals, like the transporting firearms across state lines, expanding that, and also allowing individuals to adopt markings for NFA application purposes, or stuff like that, as well as the import stuff. Now with the once this rule is codified, those former Soviet states will be removed off of the importation restriction list, and now they can import ammunition or firearms, which that'll be a huge thing. And the receiver dual use receiver and barrel or dual use barrel and foreign framer receiver thing that's happening, that'll, again, this is all, a lot of this stuff is going to drop the price of imported firearms and also make NFA compliance a lot easier, which I think are both really, really good things. Now, I wish the NFA in its entirety would be abolished, but if it is going to stay around at least for the next few months or year or so, that we have to tolerate this, then I can live with these changes for now. I think this is it's a positive step forward. But anyways, that's enough yapping for me. If you guys have any comments, feel free to comment them below. And as always, guys, thank you for watching. I'll upload new videos soon. I was working on a handful of stuff, and then it all kind of fell apart, which is unfortunate. But new stuff will be coming soon. And I thank you guys for watching, and I hope you all have a great day. Until next time, guys, take care.